to the Harbour Bridge protest and the war crime, the actual war crime of the slowly dying hostages. A cruel sight the world turns away from when it's unfolding right before our eyes. Now, we witnessed a national disgrace on the weekend as our iconic Harbour Bridge was defiled and abused for a divisive protest, where flags of terror leaders were flown and death chants rang out. Here you can see Julian Assange, Mary Kostakidis and Marine Farouki standing in the front row with a photo of Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, behind them. And as you know, he's a dictator who executes gays, imprisons women who refuse to wear the veil, and funds terrorism. Al-Qaeda flags were also spotted, like this one, and this terror flag as well. And here were more terrorist flags. And this is the Hamas symbol, an inverted red triangle. And as you just heard there, many of the chants that rang out on the Harbour Bridge called for the destruction of Israel and death to Jews. One protester even held up a poster with the Nazi swastika in a Star of David, the swastika. Yet, the Sydney Morning Herald today dared to claim this protest was not about Jews. Alexandra Smith wrote that the rally was a stand for humanity and that no one should suggest that the city had turned its back on our Jewish community. What utter nonsense. Imagine having the hide to tell an abused woman, for example, what is or isn't domestic violence. The Sydney Morning Herald doesn't get to decide what's anti-Semitic. With swastikas, pictures of terror leaders and chants to kill the Israeli Defence Force, the Defence Force that's made up of young, brave, strong Jews, including, by the way, Australians, who are trying to ensure the survival of the Jewish state. Yes, that is all anti-Semitism. And the Harbour Bridge protest organisers were the same group behind the hateful rally on the steps of the Opera House on October 9. Or perhaps a correction is in order from the Herald. As former Fairfax journalist Julie Sago wrote, "Death to the IDF and from the river to the sea will enjoy purity by association with some of the defining Harbour Bridge marches in recent history, including the Walk for Reconciliation with Indigenous Australia in 2000. And she asks, what next? The inaugural Yaya Sinwar October 7 Memorial March on the Kokoda Trail? She says the marches in Sydney will almost certainly not call for a two-state solution and the end of Hamas, the jihadi enemy of civilization, only for the end of Israel, an outcome they describe as peace and humanity. Yet again, the Herald is on the wrong side of history. Thankfully, it rained down on this offensive rally and there were more umbrellas than flags. Now, New South Wales Premier Chris Minns had sensibly outlawed this protest on the Harbour Bridge in the interest of public safety and, no doubt, social cohesion. But outrageously, Supreme Court Judge Belinda Rigg overturned his ruling. Apparently, she has no problem with allowing our national icon to become a platform for hate and an international embarrassment. And on Sunday, the bridge was a sight of shame. It's unfathomable how this was allowed to go ahead. As Julie and Lisa said, the Harbour Bridge is a symbol of unity for our nation, and it shouldn't be turned into a stage for protests that seek to divide us.
The Sydney Harbour Bridge is a symbol of the unity of the city. It should not be used for divisive protests of this sort that disrupt our city.
Now, the protest was perpetuated by a false narrative that Israel is to blame for the suffering in Gaza. And the facts are ignored. There are clearly truckloads of aid delivered by Israel that hasn't been distributed. Now, an estimated 100,000 people turned out, but the size of the crowd does not make them right. And if we look back in history, the Nuremberg rallies in Nazi Germany were attended by some 700,000 people. And we now look back on that with disgust and shame. Now, I'm not calling the protesters yesterday Nazis, but the size of a crowd alone is never enough to justify something we believe is wrong. And if these protesters were serious about caring for Palestinian suffering, they would be protesting Hamas. Hamas is the only reason this war began, and it's the only reason it continues. Hamas refuses to accept ceasefire proposals to end the war. Hamas refuses to return 50 hostages, which would end the war. And Hamas refuses to distribute the tons of aid Israel has delivered to Gaza. And the trucks are sitting there idle, food going to waste.
Hundreds upon hundreds of pallets of aid just rotting in the sun instead of being delivered to the people who need it. Here are boxes and boxes of baby food that Israel has let into Gaza and the UN hasn't picked up. You can see the UNICEF logos on them. You can see bottles of baby food.
Hamas is solely responsible for Palestinian suffering. But the protesters clearly aren't motivated by an end to Palestinian suffering because they're not protesting Hamas or calling on Hamas to end the war, and many were calling for the destruction of Israel. This was a protest of hate, not a protest of peace. Now, we all want the war to be over. We never wanted it in the first place. But that will never happen until the hostages are free. Israeli Ambassador to Australia, Amir Maimon, made this quite clear last night at an event for the Hebrew University in Sydney.
Lately, I'm asked quite often by senior government officials why Israel is still fighting. And my response that is we have 50 good reasons why we are still fighting. We still have 50 hostages held by the barbaric organization, terror organization, Hamas. And there is one thing that they fail to understand. The importance that we attribute to life in Israel, to every single life. We will continue to fight until we bring the last of our hostages back home.
And it's a point Never Again is now heard. The pastor, Mark Leach, also made yesterday on Sky News.
How do we save innocent people in Gaza? Open the border to Egypt, establish a refugee camp, let the women and children out to flee the conflict zone. And Hamas started this war. Hamas can finish this war by releasing the hostages and surrendering.
And the hostages, the images we're seeing, are the true picture of cruelty, clearly reminiscent of the Holocaust, and yet the world looks away. Avital David is just 24 years old. He was kidnapped from Israel on October 7. He'd been at the Nova Music Festival when he was dragged by terrorists at gunpoint. That was 661 days ago. And now look at him. And a warning, the footage is very distressing, but the family of Avital David have requested that it be shown around the world.
מה שאני עושה עכשיו, אני חופר את הקבר, הקבר שמיד מבחינתי לי, כי כל יום שעובר הגוף שלי הולך, נחלש, נראה רזה יותר וחלש יותר. מבחינתי זה נראה שאני בדרך למוות שלי. חופר לעצמי את הקבר שבו אני אולי אשכב.
It's devastating. His family described him as a living skeleton. He is visibly starved. He's emaciated. He is dying and digging his own grave. This is exactly what happened in the Holocaust. And by the way, his brother will be on my show tomorrow night, Tuesday night, for an exclusive interview, so don't miss that tomorrow night. And just tonight, the Islamic Jihad have released another horrific hostage video of 22-year-old Ram Baslavsky. And his family have also given permission for this following footage, again, distressing, to be shown. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was right to compare Hamas to Nazis after seeing this footage. And yet those protesters on the Harbour Bridge most likely didn't spare a thought for the hostages, and the media don't seem to care about them either. The New York Times published a false picture of starvation on their front page that they had to issue a clarification for. But where was their front page of hostage Avital David? Thankfully, the New York Post, owned by the company I work for, News Corp, did publish this powerful front page. And our world without News Corp would truly be lost. The continuing war crimes of the hostages is taking place before our very eyes, but no one seems to care. And in fact, the Albanese government throws another $20 million in aid for Hamas-controlled Gaza. I mean, do they even know where the tens and tens of millions of dollars already given, our taxpayer funds, do they even know how they've been spent? And there have been war crimes in the Middle East, but not by Israel. The war crimes are by the Palestinian terrorists towards Israelis on and since October 7. And yet they are being rewarded for their war crimes, for their massacres. The UK, Canada, France and others are preparing to recognise a Palestinian state at the United Nations General Assembly in September. It's such an absurd notion. The move to recognise a state where a terror group remains in control, where it's deliberately starving hostages and causing Palestinian suffering. I mean, our international leaders should be finding a way to remove Hamas, disarm all the terror groups and bring home the hostages. Instead, these weak international leaders are being manipulated by Hamas, a terror group. And Hamas knows it. Hamas is now proudly boasting that Palestinian recognition is the fruits of their terrorism. A senior Hamas figure, Ghazi Hamad, told Al Jazeera the initiative by several countries to recognise a Palestinian state is one of the fruits of October 7. Now, Alex Rifchin last night at the Hebrew University event spoke about how a two-state solution may be morally correct, but, he said, it's practically impossible. And he tackled the question of why attempts to solve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict have failed, and why Israeli withdrawal from Gaza a decade ago didn't lead to peace, but instead resulted in October 7.
It is because this is not a border dispute. It is not a territorial disagreement. It has always been about the place of an autonomous Jewish presence in the Middle East. It has been a battle between Zionism on the one hand and anti-Zionism on the other. The survival of a Jewish state or its complete destruction. And there is no compromise or middle ground to be found between life and death.
And that is profound, and that's what it comes down to. And Alex spoke about the difference between the Palestinian mindset versus other Arab nations.
Because the Egyptian, the Emirati, the Saudi might harbour resentment of Israel, might view it as a thorn in the body of Islam, but they're not defined by their opposition to Israel and Zionism. They have civilizations, independent national identities, stories and traditions that have nothing to do with Israel and the Jews. They can cease war with Israel and still remain who they are. But the Palestinian national identity arose as a direct counterpoint to Zionism, Palestinian identity is opposition to Zionism and Israel. This is why the Palestinian flag is taken up by those with a fetish for Arab resistance and anti-Zionist ideology. Their national heroes are their martyrs. And so Palestinian nationalism is incapable of accepting a two-state solution that would extinguish their claims to the entirety of the land and permanently entrench a Jewish state in the heart of the Middle East. To do so would not only destroy their dreams of a great return, it would destroy their very identities. Western governments do not grasp this.
Amazing points, and that is the fundamental problem with Western nations now accelerating the move to a two-state solution. The issue isn't Israel, it's the Palestinian territories that won't accept Israel having a state at all. And it's a point Palestinian protesters made in Melbourne this weekend.
We do not abide by this two-state solution that Australia and other Western nations call for.
They don't want a two-state solution, they want the destruction of Israel. And pushing for a two-state solution when the Palestinians won't accept any Jewish state at all is madness from Western governments. A two-state solution right now, like it or not, is a fantasy. And it will continue to be so until the Palestinian national identity is no longer defined by hatred for Israel. Or, as legendary Israeli Prime Minister Golda Meir put it, peace will come when they love their children more than they hate us. Until that time, the war, in one form or another, will inevitably continue.